Look at this shit. Honestly, the first time I saw this dude, I was like, do 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 do. It actually made me go, whoa. Not much in WoW makes me go, whoa, but that did. And so, I did want to talk about this zone in the weekly reset, because we love talking about the new zones in the weekly reset, always fun. But this zone is wild, and I have thoughts about this zone. I'm actually like really surprised by how this zone has turned out. In a good way, which I'd like to talk about. There's some excellent lore in this zone, but one of the main thoughts that I have about it is if this zone was originally planned to be in the War Within, as, we've been led to believe, and it was cut from the War Within and moved to, Midnight instead, I would just like to say, thank goodness. Thank goodness this zone was cut from the War Within. Thank fuck. Thank goodness. I just want to say, I'm so glad that this wasn't in the War Within. Not because it's not a good zone. It really is. And actually, the things about this zone that I like are things I was not expecting in this zone at all. The scale of this zone is wild. Like, you feel like you're in Gulliver's Travels. Like, there's a real kind of like journey to the center of the earth, makes sense really, but feel about this zone. It's not just like, honestly, like the fungal stuff doesn't feel all that Zangarmarsh-y to me. It doesn't feel like, Zangarmarsh very much feels like a drained swamp, right? Which is really, really cool. Yeah, you can see all the roots. It's really fantastic. Let's go on a route tour. But like the openness of this zone and like the way this shit just towers above you, it does feel like you're kind of in the land of the giants a little bit. You've got like the light infused roots of Shaladrasil, I think. And this is where the light bloom started, and the light bloom obviously very, very important to the story. So I think this is Shaladrasil's roots. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the lighty ones. And like, can you see like how big this shit looks? So huge. Absolutely vast. And like, I haven't been in a zone where the things in the zone felt so big and so giant. Like, I genuinely feel like I'm in the land of giants here. The scale of the things in this zone is absolutely wild. But look at the scale going on here. And it's got one of those awesome skyboxes where it's like, the skybox suggests it goes on and on and on. Like all these winding routes in the skybox and shit. And I love shit like that. I don't mean that like the zone itself is really big, although it is quite big. I mean, like, just the scale of the stuff in this zone is what feels big. It's vast, and it dwarfs you. And I don't remember, like, a WoW zone where I have felt this dwarfed before, as it were. Does that make sense? So, you can see here, that is the cradle. We're going to have a lore chat as well, because this is very, very interesting. But first of all, I just want to say, like, yeah, I'm really glad this zone, if it was planned to be in the War Within, I'm really glad it did not make it to the War Within. Because I think this zone is brilliant. I think it's really, really cool. It's much better than I thought it was going to be. It's much more interesting than I thought it was going to be. It's got a much different kind of like aesthetic and vibe to it than I thought there was going to be. But I think it would have been too much for the War Within. I think if you'd gone to the War Within and you'd had all those opening zones, and then the first patch had been the Undermine, and then the final patch, like a lot of people assume would have been the case before they made the changes, was this, it wouldn't have been good. It's too, like, it's vast, and it feels giant, and it feels like there's a huge amount of scale here, but another underground zone like this, and like, the light effects here and stuff are a little bit like Beladar, This on a smaller scale wouldn't have had the right impact. Exactly. And like even this exact zone, which, and I don't think the zone would have been this big or this detailed had it been in War Within, but even this exact zone just put in the game instead of Koresh, it just wouldn't have been as good. I'm just really glad that they did Koresh instead. You know, I just think that was the correct decision. Like, if they were planning on the Rootlands being a zone in the War Within, I feel like they made the right decision not doing it. Regardless of how it fits into a trilogy or whatever, like, I feel like it was just the right creative decision not to make it a zone in the War Within. It would have been too much underground shit, honestly. And this is as undergroundy as it gets. This zone is like, I mean, look how stunning this zone is. It's incredible. So I'm really, really glad that they didn't put this into the War Within. I think the War Within is better for it not being in the War Within. And I think Midnight is probably better for it being in Midnight. So I think overall, the correct decision, and I'm sick of people talking like it's somehow a bad thing. We always talk about, we talk about content getting moved or cut or unfinished or whatever. In terms of video games, always from the point of view of like, oh, they must have run out of resources, or they must have done this for a business reason or whatever. And like, as a creative person, as like someone who does writing, as a person who makes things, that's always rubbed me up the wrong way. This idea that if something is cut or moved or changed, it's always bad. And like that's so disrespectful to like the creative process. This idea that, oh, it has to be a bad thing that they cut this idea or they cut this thing they were making. And it's like, no, they might have cut it because of resources, but they might have just cut it for artistic reasons because they wanted to do something better or because they didn't think it worked. And like, I think this is a great example of that. This would not have been as good in the War Within. I personally believe that the creative decision that they made here was the correct one. And it wasn't like, oh, we're gonna have to put this in a later expansion to drag this story out over like a 3 expansion arc. It's like, no, like this actually isn't as good in the War Within. Simple as that. We're not dragging this story out. That doesn't have to be the reason why we've moved it. It's like literally, we sat down, we looked at it. It was too similar to some of the other stuff in the War Within. It'd be better just to have something completely different for the end of the expansion. And why not fight a fucking Void Lord? That'd be cool. And let's put this in an expansion where it can have like, instead of being something that is led up to, we can make this zone and the story involved in this zone like fundamental to the main story of the expansion, which we couldn't do in the War Within because we were planning it as a final zone, right? And yeah, it would have been too much underground. I completely... cutting simply means it was cut. It has no evaluation on its worth. Well, except yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, sometimes good things can get cut because it doesn't fit. Yeah, I completely agree with that. But and that's what I mean. I think people always talk, and I think a great example of this is Baldur's Gate 3 with the upper city of Baldur's Gate in Baldur's Gate 3. We know that they were planning to do the upper city of Baldur's Gate 3 at first, and there is a tiny bit in the end scenario which is like set there, but they cut it, right? And everyone was like, oh, I think it's so bad that they cut that. Or think about it, we could have had the upper city, and they had to come out and be like, look, we didn't cut it for budget reasons or development reasons. We just cut it because it was like, it didn't help the flow of the game. Like, the game flows better without it. And that's what we wanted. And like, they made one of the best games ever made. And if they don't think the game would have been better with the upper city in it, I fucking believe them. They made that amazing game. I fucking believe them that it wouldn't have been as good with that in it. People just don't like things being cut because they just want to play more WoW is all. Yeah, but I mean, there is trade-offs as well. So, for example, like the extra kind of fell island that was cut from Legion. There's a big island which was going to be a patch zone island off the coast of the Broken Shore. It was all felly, and there were big demons there and stuff like that. It was in the game. It hadn't been all built, but the landmass was there. And they cut that. During the alpha, and when they cut it, people were like, boo, why did you do, oh no, this is like the ogre bit, in WoD all over again. And Ian Hazzikostas was literally like, we've cut it for a reason. And the reason we cut it is because we're going to do something cooler. We just don't want to do this anymore. And simple as that. And we got fucking Argus. There's reason to believe that there would have been like portals to Argus in that zone that they were making, because there are old maps of Argus as well that were connected to it. But they were like little instance things, not like a whole 3 zones, which is what we turned out for. But yeah, like, so that's a good example of, you know, a thing was cut and it was better. And I think, you know, the way people talk about this zone in particular is this idea that the only reason it was moved from the War Within is because they were somehow trying to like prolong the life of this story and spread this story out over 3 expansions, whereas it really should have just been told in 1 or something like that. It's just not, it's not really the case. Like, the game is better, in my opinion, so far, and I reserve the right to change my mind, obviously. But at the moment, I'm definitely thinking that the game is better that this zone is in Midnight as opposed to the War Within. And the War Within is better for having Koresh as a final zone than if it had this one. 1,000,000%. Like, that's what I think. So yeah, it does kind of annoy me a bit the way people talk about it. If they moved it into Midnight, I believe it would have been to make the 3 X-Pack saga flow together more seamlessly. Well, I mean, I guess so, but also, like, it just wouldn't have been as good in the War Within, you know? So it's like, the way people talk about it and the way people frame it so often is, oh, well, the War Within had to take that hit. A shame we had to lose this zone from the War Within, you know? So that it could work as a trilogy. I just don't think that's the case. You know, it's like, regardless of the trilogy, this zone is better not being in War Within. You know, like, regardless of the like, forget the trilogy just for a sec, because that's definitely true as well. But regardless of that, the War Within is just a better game by this zone not being in it. So yeah. Anyway, let's talk about the lore implications of this zone, because it's very, very cool. That is the cradle. That is where Azeroth used to live. That's where the world soul used to be. And it's like the cradle of all the roots of the world tree kind of coming together. And the roots kind of like grow here naturally. She could not customize her home. Or maybe this is how she liked it. So this is where the world soul used to be until the Titans stole it. Was she being molded by the life realm then? I don't think it's as simple as that, no. But yeah, the Titans basically just took her, just plucked her out and put her in the core way, we assume. That's got to be life aspected. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure, but maybe. I'm not so sure. Who knows? Like, anyway, the Titans took her out, and it was when they. So do you remember when Aman'Thul plucked Y'Shaarj out of the planet and left the Well of Eternity there as like an open wound? Well, when they took Azeroth's world soul, what was left behind as like a wound when they did that was the Rift of Aln. And like, you know, that's what created like the Nightmare realm. And there's this stuff called Aln dust, which is basically like Azerite dust, which exists here, and which is like this really important resource, which it turns out is like a cure for like the light bloom and shit like that. Some say the Rift of Aln is in the Harendar zone. There is part of the Rift of Aln here, yeah. Yeah, the Rift of Aln is a manifestation of Azeroth's trauma. Basically, yeah. Basically. And their gods that they worshipped absolutely was Azeroth. They called her something different, but it was Azeroth. In fact, I made some notes. Hang on. let me refer to my notes here, okay? Yeah, so they called their goddess Aln Harandar, right? And so that's why they call it Aln Dust and the Rift of Aln, okay? Because they called the world soul Aln Hara. So yeah, Aln is basically Azeroth's other name. So Aln Hara could it could be that they called her Aln and, she was in Harandar. Maybe that's why they refer to her as Aln Hara. Yeah. So yeah, Harandar was the cradle, and that's where the world soul was. We don't know that it was so it doesn't say that it was specifically the Titans that plucked her out of here, but she was plucked out of here. And we now know that she is in the Coreway, right? So it seems very fair to speculate, maybe even to assume that it was the Titans that did it. I'll explain how we know that later on. So yeah, the Rift of Aln is full of Aln dust, which is like the remnants of her, where she was plucked out. The Aln dust does kind of coalesce into monsters from the rift and stuff like that. It looks like azurite. Sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's yellow. Oh, I've got a thing here that says there was a cloud serpent spirit named Aln Sharan, which was like Azeroth's little pet. So some notes about the Haranar history. They are like proto-dark trolls. So there's a book that describes their history. There was a people, okay? And they kind of the people kind of split into two offshoots, right? And one of those offshoots turned their gaze to the stars and the moon. Probably dark trolls, right? And the others heard the radiant song beneath the world. And that's when they started traveling underground to try and find the world soul, which of course eventually they did. But so it's not like it was the Haranar that turned into dark trolls. It's like dark trolls and Haranar have a common ancestor, if you do believe that the ones that started looking to the moon and stuff, and if you think that they were the dark trolls, which they probably were, they share a common ancestor. That's how evolution works. Exactly. And in the literature you find around the zone, it describes their journey, and it's pretty on the fucking nose. It's they encounter Titanforge guarding secrets, kobolds, Nerubians, and old god horrors. So basically everything that you find in the War Within. Okay. So there's a mystery regarding a great shame that the Harendar carry with them, and they literally refer to it as the Great Shame. We don't know what that is. We're supposed to know, but it's in a cutscene which isn't in the game yet. So there's this great shame. I'm thinking that shame is probably the world soul getting stolen. Yeah. It seems to make sense, right? And they were like, oh, gutted we couldn't stop that happening, as you'd imagine. So that seems like the most likely thing to be the great shame. I can see the camera's gone off again. Apologies about that. So, right, the roots. Stuff about the roots, okay? There are roots for all the world trees, including in Mirdrasil. The Haranar claim that the roots naturally seek out Harandar to bask in the goddess's power. So that suggests that the goddess was there before the roots were. Does that make sense? So the idea is that the way they tell it, the world soul was there and the roots came and sought her out, as it were, in much the same way that the old gods sought her out, and in much the same way that the Titans sought her out. It's just another example of, and in much the same way that you could say a big fell sword sought her out as well. So you could absolutely say that it's the life realm's version of all of those things. You know, you could absolutely say that the world trees and the roots of the world tree boring into the world, aiming for the world soul, is like the life version of all those other things, like the old gods or Titan facilities, the core way, like the fell sword, the forge of souls for the Shadowlands, I guess. Each like set of roots has like a root warden, and the Haranar that like looks after the roots, tends the roots, but doesn't really do anything. They just kind of talk to the roots. So like the root warden who's in charge of Teldrassil has like trauma. Because like obviously she was looking after the roots of Teldrassil, and then like one day it all burned and she was like, fuck. So to say that they look after the roots is probably not the right way of putting it. Did Belemeth cause a new warden to be created? Great question. Not that I can tell. Not that I've seen. Sometimes Teldrassil's roots still flare up and burn again as well, which is kind of weird. Shaladrassil's roots have fallen to the light bloom, and the light bloom is where it first appeared in Shaladrassil's roots, and the light bloom is a big problem now. It's like an infection that infects the Rutani and the Fungari. Because the Rutani and the Fungari are like native to this kind of part of Azeroth. They don't get on very well together. It's not like a big deal, but they will fight and shit. Yeah, root fire is lasting a long time, exactly. You know, it's kind of strange how passive the Haranar are. And when I say, like, strange, I don't mean, like, strange as in badly written, but, like, they are very passive. So I've seen a lot of people being like, oh, in relation to this lore, it's like, oh, so basically the Haranar are just the most important people ever. They look after the world soul, and you've just invented a new race of people who are the most important people ever. And it's like, they don't really do anything. Like, they don't really achieve or do anything. It's not like they are the designated protectors of the world soul or anything like that. They're not like Azeroth's bodyguards, which I think a lot of people are assuming. They are literally just people who, like, heard the song. They heard, like, the song of the world soul, and they followed it, and they got there, and they were like, wow, this is fucking cool. You know? So they're just, like, people who, like, lived by Niagara Falls or whatever because they thought it was really awesome. Malfurion states something along the lines of the rift connects all across the cosmos. Why would it do that if Azeroth didn't? Yeah, maybe. Or maybe they're just going to fucking ignore that, because I would. Here's the thing about Emerald Dream lore. You've got to kind of forget most of it if you want any of the new lore to work. Like, the way they talk about the Emerald Dream and shit, in anything up to and including Legion, you kind of have to go, maybe Malfurion doesn't know everything. Maybe Malfurion's just wrong. And that's kind of the only way you can really approach it, I feel. Why would Malfurion know about it all? Why would they? Why would he? Like, what is Malfurion really when he comes down to it? He's kind of basically like a backpacker. It's like taking your Tibetan history lessons off of like a German backpacker who just spent a couple of years there, right? Like, why would you trust him? He's not even from there. Imagine spending 10k years in the dream and still knowing nothing about it. But in the grand scheme of things, 10k years is nothing. You know? That's not even most of his life. You know? It's not even most of his life. Or most of his friends' lives. It's just not a very long time to an elf. Anyway. So I don't know. Maybe it'll turn out that all of the Emerald Dream lore makes perfect sense with it. But my feeling is that it's probably best to kind of like not get too hung up on the details when it comes to the Emerald Dream. That's my feeling. I feel like that way madness lies, as it were. So I take it the Harandar is going to prevent a plant-based allied race like Guild Wars 2 Sylvari. I mean, the Rutani are very much your plant-based race, aren't they? They're like your plant warriors. They've got cool like elven bodies, but they're all made of plants. The Rutani are right there. If they wanted to do like a plant-allied race, it would be the Rutani for sure. Or you can make patch 12.2 a very convoluted story arc to explain every little detail from the past about the Emerald Dreams so that everything fits. Yeah, you could do that, couldn't you? Yeah. The Druids also believe that it bleeds into the Twisting Nether and the Great Dark Beyond. So I guess we kind of don't know. Maybe she's dreaming of the Twisting Nether. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe like, you know, so the Rift of Aln is not Azeroth. It's what was left behind when Azeroth was stolen from here. Okay, so the Rift of Aln isn't like a representation of Azeroth any more than the Well of Eternity is a representation of Y'Shaarj. Like, it is the Rift of Aln is the wound left over from Azeroth being stolen from the cradle. Being plucked from the cradle. The use of, like, the plucking imagery is very reminiscent of, like, Aman'Thul plucking Y'Shaarj out of the earth as well, right? So, again, very fair to assume that it's the Titans, even if that's not 1,000,000% confirmed. So, yeah, and that wound could definitely stretch into the cosmos, but that doesn't mean that Azeroth does, you know? Zvi, thank you for the 6 months. Thank you very much. Cheers. And so we don't know if, like, the nightmares that coalesce here from the Aln Dust, we don't know if that's Azeroth dreaming them in real time, or if it's like an aftershock from Azeroth's trauma that still kind of, like, resides there. We just don't know. My thinking is probably an aftershock rather than like these are the nightmares that Azeroth is having in real time. She's dreaming this thing right now and we've got to fight it. I feel like it's more kind of like echoes. Are the roots from the Northrend World Tree there? Which one's the Northrend World Tree? Just remind me lore-wise here. Nordrassil. Yeah, I think so. I think the roots of Nordrassil are here. Oh, Vordrassil? I don't know. Let's go on a route tour. They're supposed to all be here. So, I mean, you know. Okay, so an interesting bit of lore that I picked up on was when you left Harandar, like, following the Radiant Song before the burning of Teldrassil. Like, she left Harandar before before Teldrassil burned. Which is really interesting. The War Within makes it seem like she quite recently left. Maybe in Harandar terms, it is quite recent. But yeah, she left before Teldrassil burned. So like the roots of Teldrassil's world tree being on fire down here, that's like new to her. But you know, when we were speculating about where the Harandar are from during the War Within, and I was like, I think they can see the World Soul. I think the World Soul is literally part of the skybox of Harandar or the Rootlands or whatever it is. That would have been true. This is where, you know, they set up shop and they could see the World Soul. They could see it every day. This is where the World Soul was, in here, in the cradle, before it was taken. So they would see it every day. And yeah, until we think the Titans took it and put her in the causeway. Something took it. Something took the World Soul. And we know that the World Soul is in like a Titan thing now, so it seems likely it was probably the Titans that did it. How do you get to Harandar? Is it located beneath Eversong? We think it's actually located like beneath... oh, now I've got some... There we go. We think it's located beneath Nordrassil, like initially. We know that they did used to live around Nordrassil, and it's quite funny because when they have existed since before the Titans, obviously. And when the Titans came to Azeroth, they basically just hid. And there's like a quest you do where you like experience Harandar history, where you're literally like hiding from fucking Freya, and Freya's walking around, and you're like, yeah, don't let her see you. So the entrance thing in Azkahet is not it. Well, I mean, it might have been originally planned to be that, but no, it's not that, no. because obviously it was never going to be that once Rootlands. Like, as soon as the Rootlands maps came up, I was like, that is not going to be in this expansion. And I was right. Because it just felt like something that was, you know, originally part of a vague plan that had been changed. So they were around Hijal quite a lot before, but we don't know where this is. We don't know where the cradle is. Let me check my notes. Hang on, maybe there's something. So yeah, the idea is that like all the Harandar, they just hear the voice of Azeroth constantly. Or the old gods took it and the Titans took it from them. Maybe. Seems unlikely. I think the plucking kind of language and imagery is supposed to evoke, you know, the Titans plucking Yasharaj out of the earth as well. And like the fact that it leaves a wound in the same way that Yasharaj left a wound, I think, you know, I think it's definitely the Titans. And then the Titans came along, and you know, when they did find the Harendar, which apparently did happen, they were like, "Yo, do you want to become like part robot? Because that we can improve you. You know, we can make you into constructs. Wouldn't that be cool?" And the Harendar were like, "No, that sucks. We don't want to do that. Thank you. Fuck off." Yeah, I feel like this is so deep in the earth that it's kind of technically underneath everything. If something is in literally the center of the earth, then you can get to it wherever you are on earth by just digging down, you know? And you'll get to the center of the earth. As long as you're digging straight down, the center of the earth is technically underneath literally everything. There's no one thing that's underneath. Does that make sense? Do you think we will eventually see Force Titan infused Harandar in Last Titan? I don't know. Who knows? Maybe the Titans will, you know, attack this when they arrive or something. Who knows? Anyway, whatever. They all hear the voice of Azeroth, and there's like a gang of like Haranar whose job it is to go into the Rift of Aln and to get Aln Dust, because Aln Dust is like baller. People fucking love Aln Dust, right? Because it's like the remnants of Azeroth. And it's their job to go in, and they have to go undergo like a ritual that means they stop hearing the voice of Azeroth. So the guys whose job it is to go into the Rift of Aln and get Aln Dust, they don't hear the voice of Azeroth, and it's like this massive trauma for them. It's like it's been ripped out of them, sort of thing. There's loads of prophecies in like Haranar literature which predict like the events on Azeroth and stuff like that. There's like this kind of like, you know, poem that's lying around in one of the huts which like predicts, you know, basically every expansion sort of thing. So yeah, the light bloom is really bad. It works like a kind of infection, and that is like contagious amongst the Rutani and the Fungari. But like I say, the main presiding like characteristic of the Haranar is basically how fucking passive they are. Like they don't protect the trees. Like, you know, Teldrassil burned and they did nothing. They don't see it as their job. It's not their role. You know, they just want to live a nice, quiet life, breathing in the remnants of the fucking, well, when she was here, just looking at the world soul and being around the world soul and being like, yeah, that's cool. And now that she's gone, I get the feeling that's probably their great shame that they talk about. You know, they just want to like gather up as much that's left of her as possible, sort of thing. So yeah, I don't, you know, I know why people make like the the Avatar connection and stuff like that, because they look a bit like the things from Avatar, don't they? I've never seen Avatar, but they're not like protectors. They're not really like wardens or anything like that. They don't have like an official role. They're just a civilization that has chosen to set up by the world soul, and have made that like their whole culture. You know, but they're not like the official protectors of Azeroth, most important people ever, or anything like that. They're just, this is not what they are. It's just not who they are. You know, they're kind of useless, really.